We all desire a degree of power and control in life. And you have to understand the word power is not just like about politics or about Elon Musk or anything. I'm talking about in our day-to-day lives, right? How we interact with people. The sense that I cannot influence my boss, my colleagues, my wife, my children, the people around me, is deeply, deeply miserable for us, right? It makes us feel powerless. And when we're powerless, we turn in on ourselves, we end up hating ourselves, and we get depressed, or we become passive aggressive and we start manipulating other people in ways in which we can justify to ourselves as, oh no, I'm not really doing that. I'm actually a good person. But it actually can be very, very harmful. So you have to admit that you want a degree of power. You want the ability to influence people, and you're not going to be hypocritical. You're going to be honest with yourself, you know. Niceness is okay, is a good quality if it's under control, if you understand it and if you use it and you know how to use it strategically, and maybe it's a part of your personality and it's authentic, but it doesn't govern you. You are in control of it. And what happens is if you're the pleasing type, which is your whole strategy in life is pleasing other people, getting them to like you, which is, you know, a quality that a lot of people have, men and women, right? It doesn't come from a place of security. It comes from a place of deep, deep insecurity. You don't understand really who you are, and so you can't control it. And so you're always trying to please people. And when we can sense, we can smell people's insecurities. And when it comes to like seduction between men and women have a sixth sense of they can smell an insecure man, right? And they can smell it in you. And they can smell it in all kinds of ways. And trying so hard to please and trying so hard to be nice secretly indicates that you're actually very weak inside and is very much a turnoff, is very anti-seductive. And so you want to be nice, but you want to be strategic about it. You want to know, sometimes I don't want to be nice. Sometimes I want to create boundaries. Sometimes I want to pull back. I want to play the coquette. I want the woman to know she can't take me for granted, right? I'm not interested in her. The moment you show her that you're not interested in her, she's going to be much more interested in you. You're willing to play a little bit that tough part of it. You're in control. You're strategic. You know when to use absence and when to use presence, when to text them and call them, and when to disappear for a week or so and make them feel like they don't, they can't take you for granted. So know when to be nice, and you can use it to effect, but you also know when I don't want to be nice in this world. And that pertains to all sorts of situations in negotiation, etc. If you're always so nice in business, you're going to be you're not going to survive very long.
I come at this from a evolutionary perspective. Yeah. And so the reason, because I was so bad with women for so long and then figured out how to quote unquote play the game, and it worked literally on a dime from one day to the next, I could not be successful with women I felt like within my sexual market value. Let me not oversell this, but within my sexual market value, I could be successful sort of when I wanted to be. And it was such a set of rules that I was following that I actually had to laugh out loud. I was like, I cannot believe it took me this long to just figure out that, I have to present myself a certain way, that you don't want to go for the clothes right away, that this is about a strategic revealing of your personality. It's about understanding what's going to get them exciting. You might hate this description, but it's marketing. Once you understand that you're a brand, you have to establish what your brand means. You have to make them feel some kind of way about you. The way that you're establishing your brand better be real. And one of the things I'm sure we'll talk about today is I take all of this. I've been married to the same woman for 21 years. We've been together for 23. To me, that we had to seduce each other in the beginning. And then at some point, that becomes a deep, long-term pair bond, which is a totally different game. And I really hope everybody can get good at both games, because that's really how you end up having an amazing love life that will ride with you through the ups and downs. But seduction is real. People need to stop pretending that it's not. From my perspective, this is based on evolution, that women, and it's interesting because I think you push back a little bit on looking at the 30,000 foot view of men and women. I'll make a case for it. If you hate it, tell me you hate it. But here's my case. There's a quote, I forget who it's by. Forgive me, whoever said this. This is a paraphrase. Any individual woman is a mystery, but taken as a whole, they're a mathematical certainty. It was technically said about men, but you get the idea. And that makes sense to me. And so you're right. Like ultimately, I had to figure out my wife. I didn't just have to figure out women as a general thing. I had to figure out my wife. But every time I think of my wife as thinking like me, I can't predict her behavior. The second I lump her in the mathematical certainty of women are like this, then I'm way closer to being able to predict her behaviors. And so I think it's very important to understand the distinction between how men think and how women think, what we fantasize about, how we approach sex, what we think of as seductive.
Okay, but you're not going to get that from a book. So you can read all of the facts about this is how women think, et cetera, et cetera. The best way to do that is by observing them. So if you pay attention to the person that you're trying to see, if you start paying attention to women as young at the earliest possible age, you will see these qualities in them. You will see the fact that they are interested more in stories, that they don't want to feel like it's just about sex and you're in a hurry to get them to that point. These aren't great mysteries that you need to read from a book. It's pretty clear if you pay attention, right? So I just want to get men out of the mode because we are so goddamn analytical. It's such a problem that reading a book, reading a text, having algorithms is the only way we can think. Get the fuck out of there and pay attention to the person. Develop your mirror neurons. Develop your observational skills. Develop the human part of you that observes, that feels what the other person is feeling. If you depend so much on things that you've learned from the art of seduction or from a book, it's going to make you a bad seducer. But to the degree that you can click into those human qualities that we all possess, where you sense the emotional tone of the other person, you sense what their vulnerabilities, you sense what they're missing in life. Yes, maybe 60% of women are missing a similar thing that there are patterns to. And maybe reading about it can kind of click that into you. Okay, fine, I'm not going to say that that's all bad. But the main thing you want is to be getting out of your head and into your emotions and into observing and into feeling what the other person is feeling and not being so head-oriented and not being so analytical. You know? That, I think, is the main problem that a lot of men face.
It's really interesting. My experience was I needed to understand it analytically because I didn't have the intuition for it. And it may be that I just didn't look. I don't believe people are born with intuition. I think that it develops over time. So for whatever weird reason, the intuition I developed was that if I wrote poetry and showed up with flowers on the first date, which I actually did multiple times, that would get me somewhere. And it did not get me anywhere. I was actually once, this is where you ask any kids listening in the car to you turn the radio down, whatever. But this is a true story. I was in bed with a woman. We were getting naked. We were rounding third base. And I managed to mess that up because I displayed what I will call, at a moment where I should have been confident and masculine. You might hate that word. But I displayed what I will now, God, I don't even like saying this out loud, but it's true. I displayed a more feminine trait and was like, let's not go any farther unless this means something, which isn't what I was feeling. Those exact words, which isn't what I was feeling. Well, it was what I thought she wanted to hear, and it was not, and it put the brakes on the whole situation.
Well, it's very easy to explain why that would happen, because that makes her think that, oh, maybe he's not so into it. Maybe I'm not that attractive. Women secretly want to feel that you desire them, that she is so attractive that you're going to lose control. And you didn't lose control in that moment, and you blew it. You fucked it up. Mm-hmm. So it's very obvious why that didn't work.
Yeah. Obvious to you. Now, where were you back then, Robert Greene? Because I still want to punch myself in the mouth for that entire evening.
Well,
so yeah, lesson learned.
We've all made mistakes like that, though.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that one's pretty bad. So what I had to really begin to understand was what women actually were going to respond to, and not the terrible assumptions that I had built up in my mind.
Yeah.
And what I began to realize is that there are things that women want that they are not the same as what I want. And so when I started realizing, okay, making that person like what you just said, you're losing control. And that's where I think you get like the billionaire archetype of, okay, this is somebody that has everything that is normally this. You actually talk about this in your book. You say normally men get completely lost in what I think you refer to as masculine pursuits.
How often are you checking your credit score, afraid of identity theft or account breaches? We all use the internet every single day for important things like personal banking and remote work. So why not protect yourself with our sponsor, Aura? Aura is an all-in-one cybersecurity service that keeps you safe online. Aura identifies data brokers exposing your info and submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Aura also monitors your credit, tracks your passwords for data breaches, and secures your online activity with VPN and anti-malware protection. You can try Aura for free for 2 weeks by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code.
And so I read that to mean hyper pursuit in business, being myopically focused on something, working yourself to death, which certainly resonates with the life my wife is living right now, where I work an obscene amount. Now, if you ask my wife, what does she want? She'll say quality time, which is another way of saying, I want this person who's made a ton of money, who's at the top of the business heap. I want him to stop all of that because I'm so irresistible that he's only going to pay attention to me. And the way that makes her feel when I'm just completely focused on her, I'm not touching my phone, my mind isn't wandering, I am locked in on her. I'm making her feel physically attractive. I'm making her feel the truth, which is she is my mental equal, like all of that she's a woman I have to contend with, that she's captured my imagination, that she has taken this wild stallion as evidenced in, and I don't mean Stallion Studley, I just mean this unbroken colt that is, off running in the world of business. She's gotten a saddle on me, slowed me down, got me to pay attention to her. I mean, this is the Beauty and the Beast mythology where she is so special that she has been able to capture the attention of the person who's never had their attention captured before. Now, I've never thought about this before. I've only ever told my wife that I love you. I've never told that to another woman because I was never in love before. So for my wife, it really was what in literary circles they call, in erotic literary circles, they call the magic hoo-ha. So for my wife, she was the only one that was able to break me out of that. She's the only person that's ever got me to slow down on my ambition, to pay attention to her. And once I could see it from not just my wife's perspective, but the general, that's what women are looking for perspective. And I was like, oh, wow. Like I really get now why she wants my attention, that isn't something I should be frustrated by. That, yeah, this is, even now, 23 years in, it's a seductive tool that I can play, which is you've completely captured my attention. Like if I see my wife and she's looking good, I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing and tell her and make sure she knows and feels it viscerally. And all of that required me to understand just the psychology of the whole situation.
Mm-hmm. I have no problem with that. Is this something that I seem to have disagreed with?
No, not at all.
Okay.
That's just me appealing to the nice guys out there of I get you either it may be insecurity, which mine was certainly driven by that, or you may think it's a winning strategy. I get that, but it isn't.
Well, one thing that I think is very seductive that I can point out here, and it has a little bit to do with what you're saying, is what I call generosity. Generosity is a very powerful seductive quality. It doesn't mean money, as you might necessarily assume. It can mean money, but it means that you're generous with your attention. You're generous with what you're giving to the other person, right? So, the main thing for a man we tend to be very linear focused, mono focused on this one thing, and there's an evolutionary reason for that. For tens of thousands of years hunting, we had to just focus on one thing. Women were focusing on many different things at the same time. They could multitask. We can't. So getting out of that mono rail that you're in with your attention and being able to give to the other person and give them attention, and in the initial phases, shower them with the attention that they're not getting from other people. Although you can go a little too far with that, so sometimes you have to step back and kind of be absent for a little bit, so they don't feel like you're not like a stalker. You're not like, it doesn't come from an insecure place. You're in control of it. But the sense of being generous with your personality, with the time, with the attention you get, is incredibly, incredibly seductive. The sense that you're not generous and stingy with money, you like take them to a cheap restaurant, you ask them to pay, you're kind of, that's a sign that you're not generous in general. So and maybe that's part of the billionaire appeal, where you assume that person's going to be very generous, at least with their money. So the sense of being closed and inside yourself and stingy and not wanting to give to the other person, give of your time, your attention, your money, all these other things, that is deeply, deeply anti-seductive.
What do you think that we're living in a time right now that is complicated in a negative way by changing gender norms?
Well, I don't know if I want to get into that hornet's nest, but in seduction, I make it clear, and I made it clear in my Human Nature book, that we're a mix of qualities, that nobody is completely masculine and no woman is completely feminine. Men have feminine qualities, women have masculine qualities. Some men have more feminine qualities than masculine. Some women, we're a mix. It's a chemical thing, and there's no way to predict that, right? And it's always been that way. But there's ways that kind of element of androgyny, for instance, can be very, very seductive and very powerful if you know how to use it, right? So I'm not going to say that that's overly complicating things. In fact, the sense of kind of crossing boundaries with gender is actually a sign of some of the periods in history where things were the most open to seduction. So for centuries, women could not seduce men. And I can delineate that period. I mean, going all throughout ancient history, and I talk about it in my new book. Because to be interested in a woman so much that you wanted to give them attention and time meant that you were feminine, right? And the men were masculine. They were warriors, et cetera, et cetera. They weren't interested in the inner worlds of women. Women were there to clean the house and to make babies, essentially. So seduction was not something that really existed in the ancient world, except with some exceptions like Cleopatra, et cetera. So the idea that you're interested in a woman and in her world is already admitting that there's a feminine element within you. And so I look at moments in history, and I just wrote about this, like in the Middle Ages, where our whole notion of love came from, at least the Western notion. Or you look in the 18th century, the grand epic of seduction with Casanova and all those characters. You look at the 1920s in America and in Europe, a period of incredible sexual energy, freedom, and seduction. These were periods where there was a lot of androgyny going on. So I don't necessarily think that that's something that's going to limit the seductive qualities and the energy that's in the atmosphere. I think what's hindering us is not the gender norms. It's more our kind of defensiveness, our closed spirit, our desire to be completely in control of our circumstances by withdrawing into our egos and being afraid of being hurt, being afraid of being wrong, being afraid of not being strong, et cetera, et cetera. I think that has a more inhibiting factor on seduction in the world.
Why do you think young people are having so much less sex right now?
Well, for men, a lot of it has to do with porn. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a sociologist, but that would be my estimation. Where, first of all, they're having a lot of sex virtually. And second of all, their idea of sex and what is pleasurable and what a woman should be like comes from those ideals in pornography and the look, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's not as much of a need for them, et cetera, to kind of physically, we've become much more virtual in how we get pleasure in life. Also, I think there's an element of fear, as I said. I mean, young people have grown up in these in these periods of massive economic instability. They've had to deal with the '08 collapse, with the pandemic and everything that's happened there. So they've had to deal with circumstances that are very powerful and that are going to make them anxious, as well as all of the helicopter parenting that many of them had to live through. So they're filled with much more anxiety right now than I think in my generation. And that anxiety makes you want to kind of retreat into your own inner world. And having sex, at least for a man, and you can probably relate to this, it's a feeling of it's almost like too much. You're almost like weak afterwards. You're almost like afraid of it. You're afraid of the power that a woman has over you, right? You obviously get over that very quickly and you deal with it. But there's an element of fear involved. And especially when you're an adolescent, especially when you're younger. And so I think the levels of fear and anxiety that young people are having in the world, and rightly so, I don't condemn that for that, is probably why there's less physical, sexual, and psychological interactions with members of the opposite sex.
Yeah, I think it's inevitably going to be a very complicated issue. And like you, I'm not a scientist, but I am always willing to talk about things that I know nothing about, just to walk people through how I think about a problem. So looking at it, I think that a big part of the problem is what you were talking about with insecurity. I think that the way the world is set up right now, whether it's pornography, whether it is a society that's really spent the last several decades telling men that their masculine impulses are bad. And for better or worse, I think that male sexuality is tied up in power. And I think sex itself dances around power dynamics. It's one of the main things in female erotica is power dynamics. And you want to dive into a hornet's nest, like power dynamics. People get real weird about this subject. But with all of that, if men are either because the economy is weird and they're not able to get on the property ladder and they've got, $180,000 in debt and they don't feel like they're going anywhere and they're lost in a sense of hopelessness, they have easy access to pornography, they're just not feeling powerful. And if they're not feeling powerful, then they're going to struggle to feel confident in the bedroom. And I mean, just to really put it all out there, I think a guy has to feel confident and powerful, not in a weird, like I'm a dominant way, but strong and confident and rooted in his body and feeling good about himself to get and maintain an erection. Like, you're not going to see a lot of people who are insecure, scared, sporting erections. Those are sort of flip sides of the same coin.
Unless they take a lot of Viagra or something.
I guess, but do you really think?
I don't know.
Like, I would be surprised. It just, that puts you in, and also just bodies, right? So diet and nutrition now are so horrible that I have to imagine a lot of people are just physically not in a place where they're feeling good about themselves. You wrap that all up and you get to what I'm sure is the tip of a very large iceberg that I've grossly oversimplified. But
No. I think you touched upon a point that's very valid. I didn't touch upon it. I think is very true. Is that it's not a good time to be a man right now. It's very confusing. Our role models are very mixed up. We don't really know what is a positive virtue for a man. We think that we look at somebody like Andrew Tate as possibly an icon. At least a lot of young people do, which I don't at all. I think it's really gross and vulgar and full of all kinds of insecurities, a man like that. A kind of an icon, sort of a sense of strength from either a political figure, a leader, or an actor, or anything that used to be in the culture. We don't really have that. And men are seen as something kind of ugly in our culture. It seems like ugly energy that comes from men. And every time I read the newspaper, I see that kind of slant on things. Anytime a man is sort of revealing a kind of atavistic trait of being kind of dominant and strong, ugly. Oh, he's awful. He's primitive. He's not, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's very, very confusing. And I remember being a young man myself. Growing up, I'm such an old person that I can remember like the late 60s. and it was kind of confusing then. And I was struggling. And I had a good role model with my father. He was very gentle, but he was also quite masculine, etc. And I remember being confused about it and kind of straining and trying to find a proper masculine role model. And it was a struggle. And I found it sometimes with my teachers, my professors in school, and other people I later gravitated to. But the sense of, this is what it means to be a man. These are good qualities. The quality of being a leader, of being strong, of even being kind of dominant and being able to dominate a group and dominate a room, or to be so powerful that your voice can carry. These are all positive traits. We wouldn't be here right now, Tom, talking, you and I, if men didn't have those traits, right? If they didn't have the courage to face, enemies with spears, et cetera, et cetera. These are all positive qualities that just have to be channeled in socially productive ways, which is what an Andrew Tate doesn't do. But if only we could craft a Frankenstein monster of what an ideal male figure would be like, it would be very, very helpful for young men. And I don't mean to craft it in a fantasy way. It would be great if there were really people like that, in this world today. So, to me, a masculine quality is a kind of inner strength, a confidence that doesn't need to yell, it doesn't need to scream, it doesn't need to bully people. It's just so strong that people are attracted to it, and it emanates, it radiates itself, and people can feel it, so you don't have to yell at someone. I remember when I was on the board of directors of American Apparel, and the CEO, who we ended up firing, he was a good friend of mine. He's brilliant in some things, but he was yelling at people left, right, and center. He thought that's what power is. That's what being masculine is. And I thought it just showed incredible weakness. The ability to set an example, to tell people this is how you should be by how I'm behaving, etc. Taking responsibility, that's a masculine quality, not blaming other people. We need to redefine what it means to be masculine and what are the positive aspects of it. I think it's very, very critical for our culture.
Talk to me about aggression. I think men should have a gear that is aggressive. Should be a gear. I don't think they should live there. What do you think?
Completely. I mean, and my wife can attest to this. I'm an insanely competitive person, right? To the degree that it's almost maybe unhealthy. Right? So like I'm bicycling up a hill and people pass me. God damn it, you can't pass me. I'm going to pass you, even though right now I can't because I'm physically weaker. I'm still trying to do that on my stupid recumbent bike, etc. I'm very, very competitive. And that competitive energy, I think a lot of men have. It's what directs us towards sports, and I'm a sports addict, etc. Being competitive is allied with being ambitious. And getting back to seduction, a man who seems ambitious is very, very seductive. And having no ambition is very unmasculine and very anti-seductive. But we see the word ambition as being kind of ugly, as if it's like egocentric, as if it's selfish. But damn it, this world was built by people who are ambitious. They created it, right? You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have the internet. You wouldn't have all your little tools that you whine and complain about if it weren't for people who were incredibly ambitious. Ambitious people have created the world. So men have aggressive energy. It's the testosterone flowing through us, right? You can't repress it. You can't get rid of it. It's there. And how you channel it is the key. You can become very self-destructive. You can channel it towards violence. You can channel it towards pushing people around. Or you can say, I'm going to channel it towards being competitive, towards being the best person at what I'm doing. We talked, I think, last time I was here when I was talking about the human nature, we talked about Kobe Bryant, a man who had a dark side. He is so competitive to a degree where it could have killed him. It was just awful, and he acknowledges it. He channeled it into the basketball court, and it made him fantastic. It made him one of the greatest players ever. It's how you take that energy, that testosterone, that aggression, and what you do with it that's the critical factor. And that's where I think a lot of men are confused about it.
For the people out there who believe that their life is boring and that they're wasting it, what trap have they fallen into, and what advice do you have for them to get out of that sense?
Well, you were talking to me we were talking earlier about diet and problems with your health, and you're saying get at the root cause. So you have to get at the root cause of your boredom. And most often you're looking at it superficially. You're thinking, I just don't have enough stimulation in my life. I need to travel more. I need to get rid of my girlfriend or boyfriend and find a new relationship. My career is bothering me. I need to change jobs. That's the superficial way of dealing with the problem that's deeper. You have to look at yourself and you have to see the possible root causes of what is making you bored. A lot of it is the fact that you are looking for external stimulation, whereas looking inward and seeing who you are and what drives you and what your motivations are, what makes you different. You were talking about diet and how all the intricacies and how each person responds to foods differently, and it's very inexact science. Well, you are an individual and you have your own little weirdness, and everything about you is different, and you have all these little grains inside of you that react differently to things. You don't know who you are. You're alienated from yourself. You're alienated from your nature. You're finding career paths that don't suit you, just like I might be eating things that don't suit me. I'm sorry to keep going back to that.
No.
Right? You're involved with people that don't suit you. You don't know who you are. You don't know your core, your essence. You don't know what really excites you, what Abraham Maslow calls impulse voices. You have these little voices inside of you that are saying, I like this, I love this, this is what excites me. You're not listening to them. It's drowned out by social media, by your parents, by everybody else. So you don't know who you are. And because of that, you choose things that aren't right for you. And when you choose things that aren't right for you, you're not engaged emotionally. And when you're not engaged emotionally, you get bored and you get restless and you reach for, got to travel to Bali, got to start playing the guitar, I got to quit my job, I got to go find a new, a model to start dating or whatever. You don't, it ends up like you do it, and for a week or two it's exciting, and then it doesn't lead to anything lasting, and then you're bored and you're restless and you go on to the next thing. It's exactly what I'm writing about right now in my book on the sublime. I'm just quoting the chapter I just wrote.
I love that.
So,
I actually didn't, I know that you're writing about the sublime. I had no idea that it was about that specifically.
I know. How could you know?
True. And so in fact, I want the viewers to hear that I am desperate for your next book to come out. I really do think of you as a legend, man. Rereading the Daily Laws in prep for this, I am freaked out by how accurately you get a certain aspect of the human condition. So with that in mind, is it that people don't have the balls to look at who they really are? Is it just that things are getting drowned out and they don't know how to create the silence? Like, why is it so hard for people to understand themselves?
Well, it's hard. And our default position is to take the path of least resistance about what is easy, So right now, and I should hardly talk, but people are extremely interested in drugs, right? In like psychoactive drugs, mushrooms, etc. Trust me, I did a lot of that in my 20s. I have nothing against it, right? But you have the capacity in you to be continually high on life, to almost have a drug-like effect. We have these remarkable senses, our ability to pick up colors, etc., etc. You could be continually tripping. You don't need drugs. Your brain is wired for this kind of interaction with life.
That doesn't feel true to me. So how do we tap into that? What am I doing
because
wrong?
it takes effort. Whereas popping a pill, whereas just doing the easy thing, whereas looking at yourself and introspecting requires effort and it requires pain, right? Because when I look at myself, as I do with my meditation every morning, God, Robert, you've got a lot of problems, man. Why do these thoughts keep popping